far you have come on your own, but never alone. Through the rain and through the shine, here's your moment, it's your time. You stood tall and now you see, standing in your destiny. 100 women growing strong. 100 women where you belong. You stood tall and now you see, you have reached your destiny. Woman, woman.
As people of African descent, we offer this land recognition in solidarity with the indigenous peoples of Turtle Island in the efforts and deliberate intentions toward decolonization. As people of African descent, we acknowledge the land of Turtle Island that sustains us, express deep gratitude to its indigenous peoples, and pledge to honor our dignity and divinity that ultimately connects us all. By Kay Johnson. Welcome to 100 ABC Fireside Chats. 100 Accomplished Black Canadian Women is a bold project initiated by co-authors and co-founders, the Honorable Dr. Jean Augustine, Dr. Denise O'Neill Green, and Donna Jones Simmons. Our mission is to celebrate and archive the professional accomplishments of trailblazing Black women from all across Canada. The goal is to create an ever-expanding database available for current and future generations via print media, public and private libraries, as well as our website, which is www.100abcwomen.ca. In addition to our fireside chats on topics that matter to our communities, such as education, healthcare, entertainment, creative arts, trade union, and so much more, we offer biennial book launching galas and biannual symposiums. The co-authors and co-founders would like to take this opportunity to thank each of you for attending today's fireside chat. We know that you will find these sessions educational and inspirational. So sit back, relax, and hear from our brilliant and talented honorees.
2026 Fireside Chat, Season 5, Episode 4, The Power of Narrative, Media, and Representation. I am so excited to be here to discuss how media shapes perspectives of Black women in Canada. Not only do we have an amazing lineup of panelists, but this topic is so apropos in today's world when it seems to be a global uprising in anti-Black racism and a deliberate attempt to undermine Black women. We only have to think about the despicable depiction of the amazing Michelle Obama on social media recently. A racist video that was reposted by the so-called leader of the first world. Imagine having an Ivy League educated lawyer, the First Lady, a best-selling author, an amazing wife and mother. And the accolades are long and deep, being depicted as an ape. I came across a very interesting article in preparation for this webinar, and it was entitled The 4 Destructive Stereotypes About Black Women. And in this article, the author references Tamara Winfrey Harris's book and answers the question, what is wrong with Black women? With not a damn Gone with the Wind, for example, and reinforce the absurdity that Black women will bear any burden. Or you may have the Sapphire, because real women in the antebellum era were thought to be delicate damsels, whereas Black women who worked alongside men were angry, and that led to this angry Black woman. Or you have the Jezebel, the over-sexualized deviant, or the matriarch. The greatest threat to the Black community is the woman-headed households. And this was in the 1996 report that was released by the US Department of Labor. And so we have these negative stereotypes that seem to just infiltrate media constantly. These are the messages our young queens and princesses are getting. And I'm going to start by first introducing one of our panelists, the amazing Dr. Oluwani Femi Fagabahon. She is an internationally trained chemical and polymer engineer, global beauty and wellness expert, and a brand development strategist. She's a best-selling author, a dynamic speaker, and cultural ambassador. She's also a 2026 Montreal Black History Month laureate. So she's not only beauty, but she is also brains. And, in my intro, I was speaking about, people, very strong women like Michelle Obama, visible, right? And we spoke about all her credentials, yet still her visibility is not being enough, and emphasize accuracy, agency, and ownership. What does that actually look like in real life for Black women in Canada, Dr. Oluwani Femi?
Thank you very much, Kathy, for that beautiful introduction, and I'm happy to be here today. Firstly, I want to wish everyone happy Black History Month, and with respect to today's topic, which is just about how the power of narrative can shape what's going on in the society, and you mentioning the accuracy, mentioning, sorry, can you repeat, just to be sure, agency and ownership? For me, I would say across films, news, and social platforms, representation has improved, but the visibility we're getting is not enough because those 3 things are missing. And those are the things I think shape how we are being represented out there. And when all of these that are there lacks depth, we don't get to understand what exactly is going on in the Black community. So regarding the 3 things, which is accuracy, which is agency and ownership, I would say visibility is not enough. So for me, it really comes down to being seen for the full scope of who we are as Black people. When we are pushing our visibility, but telling our stories incompletely, then there's a problem. It lacks depth. So for me, accuracy looks like being recognized as leaders, experts, being in the production team, being decision makers, not just a symbol of resilience or just being there as in you're existing but no relevance. And also about agency, this shows up when we are part of shaping the story. We are there, like right there, shaping something, doing something. Our voices are heard. We are being seen, we're being celebrated, we are there, like being recognized. And when you talk about ownership, I would say it's about real influence over platforms and spaces. And when these pieces come together, representation starts to open doors instead of just checking boxes. And like I said, it's not just about existing, but relevance, being relevant. We are there. We're not just numbered, but that numbers are speaking volumes. We are being seen. Thank you very much for that beautiful question once again.
Thank you. And I want to bring in Lorena Gabriel, because you mentioned about voices not being heard. And Lorena is a public relations professional. She's a podcast host and the founder of non-profit Crown Project. Her work sits at the intersection of communications, storytelling, and community impact. She's passionate about amplifying underrepresented voices and shaping narratives that reflect the fullness of Black experience in Canada. So, as you mentioned, Doctor, it's coming together. It's more than checking the boxes, and it's about voices not being heard. So, Lorena, when you think about how Black women are portrayed in Canadian media, what patterns stand out to you?
Well, for me, I feel like there's been a little bit of improvement in front of the camera, but I still feel that we're not represented as a whole. I feel like there's a certain stereotype that often gets represented on different platforms. So I don't see that big of a difference there from when I was growing up to now. So it's really important. I find that we like for instance, for me, I started a radio show here in Montreal because I've just felt like there was no platform for, especially English speaking Montrealers, whether you're a business person, whether you're in STEM, whether you're an artist, to have a platform to tell your story, to promote your products and do all those different things. So me and my friends took it upon ourselves to make sure that we create that platform. We were given that opportunity, but it was really important for me to focus on the Black community so that we can tell our stories, because I feel like we don't have those platforms. And then when we do, it's kind of like the same people that get to share that one same story. And I don't think it represents all of us very well.
Absolutely. And as the African proverb goes, until the lions have their own historians, the story of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. So, Lorena, why do you think authentic representation still feels so rare, even as conversations about diversity in media have become more frequent?
For me, from what I noticed, at one point I was working for a conference and they always made sure to have like a DEI panel that was really important to have, especially after 2020 and George Floyd. It was something that was like a mandate that they would have to do. But even having those panels, they were great because the panelists spoke about a lot of issues that we were having and how we weren't being heard and different things of that nature. But after the panel is done, nothing is being done. There's no actionable steps that are being done. I kind of feel like it's kind of like performative. They just make sure they have the panel so that you see that we did it, but they don't take anything into consideration to change the structure. And I feel like there's a lot of people that are in those positions to make those decisions that kind of gatekeep, that kind of keep us at a certain level where we can't really make those changes and really rise up within media.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that, because that's a very good point. Because as Bell Hooks says, representation is a crucial location of struggle for any exploited and oppressed people, asserting subjectivity and decolonization of the mind. And, I'm going to ask Sharon Hines, who is a highly successful trailblazer leader with over 25 plus years of international and Canadian career experience gained across multiple industry sectors, including broadcasting, radio, and TV. She is known for leading initiatives that support and amplify the voices of women and actively engages in several community outreach and educational programs. She currently works for Rogers Sports and Media as a program manager. And her accomplishments are many, but I want to share some of her proudest accomplishments, like the 2026 Women in Music Canada Toronto Career Achievement Award, the 2024 Women in Communication and Technology Leadership Trailblazer Award, and of course, she is a recipient of the 100 ABC Award, as well as the first Black woman in Canada to be appointed to the Canadian Country Music Association Board. And as somebody who is in the field, Sharon, could you, when you hear about the word representation within the Canadian media space, what does that mean to you personally? Not in theory, but from your lived experience.
Thank you, Kathy, and good afternoon, everyone. And, it's so great, the speakers and the panelists here. I'm amongst greatness, and I'm actually grateful and humbled to be here. Happy Black History Month, everyone. So when we talk about representation, it becomes real because you want to make sure, as a woman of color, that people recognize you without you being reduced or explained. It's this difference between being seen and being understood. Let me share a bit of my story. I migrated to Canada from Guyana, South America in the early 1990s. And right away, I noticed there was a lack of diverse role models in media and leadership positions, which made it challenging for me to envision my own success. However, through networking, mentorship, and sponsorship, I was determined to make my own mark. I commenced my broadcasting career journey within the radio landscape in the early 1990s, which led me to be, over a decade, the first woman of color to launch the credit and traffic operational teams for 3 niche radio stations. KISS 92, Toronto, when it was a country station, it was Toronto's first country station. Flow 93.5 was Toronto's first urban radio station, and G98.7, which focused in the Caribbean diaspora community. There was a lot in there, but representation matters when it signals that we all belong in these spaces. It is crucial for us to amplify and support diverse narratives, as they not only reflect a reality of experiences, but also challenges the stereotypes. And I know, Kathy, you spoke about the depiction of, Michelle Obama earlier on when you opened up. And seeing more women of color in prominent roles, it truly allows us to tell our own stories authentically. It helps us to foster a more inclusive environment. And this way we can reach our own potential, because the path forward is more important than where we came from. It's about how we level up our game. What are we doing to rediscover ourselves and being in that space and being in the moment. Thank you.
Yeah. So then let me ask you, Sharon, because you spoke about the path forward. What advice would you give to younger Canadians reshaping the cultural narratives outside traditional media?
This is a very important question, because in today's media landscape, Gen Zs, as they're called, they're primarily on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat. They're engaging in social media daily. They're learning how to bypass the gatekeepers. They're telling stories in hybrid languages. So corporations, small and big, need to pay attention. My advice to them is to understand how media works. Where does the funding come from? Who are the gatekeepers? Learn it strategically. Know the rules that allows you to give you leverage. Representation without power is a trap. Understand who profits from your story. Culture moves laterally. Collaborate with peers, collectives, community platforms. Remember that influence is not a promotion, it's a network. And also understand that you're not responsible for fixing every broken system. So choose your battles carefully. Understand that it's a strategy. Be very strategic, because sustainable influence outlasts viral outrage. You're not the future, you're the present. So the decisions you make today will impact the rest of your life and those to follow. So choose wisely.
Yeah, thank you for that powerful words. representation without power is a trap. I like that. And speaking of media, because there are many forms of media, I would like to bring up Lisa Skeet. She was brought into music, I should say, through a family of creatives in music and radio. In the late 1990s, Lisa began her journalistic journey with Upfront magazine. Remember that? Leading her to meeting Ron Nelson, an iconic radio hip hop and reggae personality. From there, Lisa was part of CKLN's Friday Night Regamania crew and presently is an in-staff writer for L3 magazine. Now, Lisa, I want to switch gears in terms of the music industry a bit, because representation, as Simone de Beauvoir says, representation of the world, like the world itself, is a work of men. They describe it from their own point of view, which they confuse with the absolute truth. So women are ingrained in music in many different ways. And with the cliche that the industry is a man-dominated world, can you comment on your experience?
Definitely. And first of all, I'm just I've got a bit of a cold, so I hope you can hear me. And
Yeah.
pleasure to be here, pleasure to be amongst such great women and one of the 100 ABC Black women, and to be able to speak to you about music. And Sharon, you would know, and probably others on the call, that there is a stereotype, yet we are in front of the camera, we are the behind the scenes, we are the producers, we are the trailblazers, yet when we're in front of the cameras or behind the cameras, and I speak of my experience, are we sexy enough? Are we looking the part? Even though I'm on the radio, you don't see me. But when I go and I work with artists and things like that, and the lived experience working with many, many people in reggae, everybody, and seeing the geniuses behind things like the Marcia Griffiths and the Rita Marleys, who held together Tough Gong. They were the glue. Yet they had to be behind. You be the glue. You be the nurturer. You be the mother and incubator. But when it came to how we present in music, it was the man. He was the genre. And it's still the same, even in radio, where we would have Friday Night Regamania, again, CKLN, a very important community radio. And we'd look at music, not just from the dance hall and the reggae of the day, but we also made sure that we had a focus on who we were as people. We took the topics from the community, and they were difficult things, racism, anti-Black racism in Toronto. So CKLN stood out as one of the stations that was into explaining us as a people, which again might not be the demographic of sexiness or trendiness. So you'll notice that a lot of community radio, which CKLN was, and very important part of radio, did not survive. Yet some of us moved forward into the flows, the G98s. And again, women were at the helm of producing, like Sharon. I remember sitting on the Junos for reggae recording artists, and where were the women submitting their work? It was men who were bringing reggae vibes or dancehall vibes, but there were very few women. Yet when you had the Moys um, and Canadian women, it was, what were they bringing forward? Were they bringing for roots and culture, or were they bringing around the dance hall? And that would always be pushed forward, the dance hall, the trend. You know what I'm talking about. So it's hard to navigate within the system back in the 90s to now, even journalistically speaking. Some of you can say, and I can certainly say, when I've represented artists in their young time, like Sean Paul and Baby Sham, and traveling with a very young Sizzla Kalonji. And the promoter would often, I would be doing A&R, and they'd go to the artist and I'd be like, hey, hi, Put that with me. And I'm putting together, the interview notes and things like that. Bypass me all the time until they had to see me. But that was us, and I'm sure many of you here would have to insist, hey, that's my part. You've got to talk to me about this because we're representing the artist. But they're on the stage, they're doing their thing. But oftentimes women, no matter if we were producers or directors or artists, radio personalities, TV personalities, we even had to represent a niche that wasn't of us necessarily. We were told to be that. And sometimes we weren't in sync with that or in vibe with that. And so you'll see certain women artists, talented as well, of course, but not necessarily I'll give you an example. Sharon Hall, formerly known as Lady Saw, a gospel artist now. Is she charting as much as she did when she was a dance hall artist? No. But she writes her music still. She produces. And that's the plight of women in our industry to this day.
So, Lisa, do you think there is an expectation for women in music to be portrayed in a stereotypical kind of sexy way to be successful?
I think that we've pushed the parameters of seeing ourselves differently and in different ways. If you are that person, the sexy, the dance hall, the trendy pop artist that is what some people would say dresses for the industry, or you're the lyricist that is also a creative that plays music, writes your lyrics, you're put into that niche of, okay, yeah, you're great, but it comes down to what they think the trend wants, like the Gen Z. What do they want? What do they want an artist to look like? And so some artists have come out of who they are and who they want to be to get on the scene. And then when they can produce if you look at an album, you'll see many different lights of people because they can express themselves in a different song, in a different way, but they're marketed. So I think if I could say it just fast that um, once we are the creators and we are the owners of platforms and the developers of the media and the way in which it's going, we can manipulate how we are seen and what we can give out because we're not monolithic. So I think that, yes, to your point, that does still happen, but we can also be the narrator of that and have the courage to do that as well.
Okay, thank you for that. Because I'm going to first address Dr. Oliwani Femi first, and I'd invite other panelists to jump in with their thoughts after she answers this question, because I'm interested to hear the different perspectives as to the role that media institutions play in changing these narratives, and what can Black women do while that change is still happening. So, Dr. Olewani Femi, if you'd like to start us off, please.
Thank you very much for that beautiful question. And I would say media institutions have a big role to play, especially when it comes to who is in the room making decisions. We need to know how that is being put together. Real change happens when Black women are in editorial, production, and leadership roles, not just featured occasionally, like, okay, we want to feature you as a guest, we want you here or at the backstage. We need our voices heard. And I also realized that at the same time, Black women aren't waiting. We are building our own platforms. We are building our own empires, supporting one another, and being more intentional about how we show up and position our expertise, because nobody's going to share a story for you. Nobody will tell your story like you can. You own your story. You alone can tell your story exactly how it should be told, because we've heard a lot of incomplete stories that isn't shaping well for us as Black community members. So I think both things matter and both are happening at the same time. So I'll leave you with this, that when Black women hold the narrative, the impact is far beyond visibility. So we need to have people out there shaping decisions. Like, we need to be represented fully, not just at the backstage. Thank you very much.
Would anybody else like to jump in, Lorena?
I think, well, what was said is great. I totally agree with that. And then also too, something that Sharon had said earlier is about like for Gen Z or the people that are creating their own platforms on social media and the different outlets that we have now, we're able to create our own stories. So I think it's really, really smart if we do learn about like the whole field of media. I think that is something that is missing, that can help propel us tell our stories at a higher level and really know who the people are that are in these high level positions. And another thing too is networking. It's something that has helped me. So I think that's such a big part of it too, networking and then working with your peers as well. Because I think if we come together, we support each other, we connect, I feel like that will push us along. And I feel like the bigger media companies will pay attention to that. I don't think they would have a choice if we all come together and we're making our own content and it's doing really well. I think that's something that they would have to pay attention to.
Thank you for that. And Lisa, from the music side, do you have any thoughts on the role they play in changing these narratives?
Specifically Gen Z or in general? Like,
Yeah, in general.
okay. So, but to your point, Lorena, it is very important. And I think that one of the things that all of us have said is, and I get a common thread that we have to create that narrative. We have to be a part of that narrative. We have to be the narrative. And there's different ways of doing that. For example, the initiatives that we've heard about, and tying that into the Gen Z, almost like succession planning of our succession of our narrative, and pooling our experience from way back in the days and when we had these struggles to how it looks a continued struggle. And as you said, to learn, like I myself have to get up to the time with regards to what media looks like now, how the demographics want to hear and see us, and then implant in that how we want to see ourselves. How, like, as again, to the example of an accomplished woman in so many aspects being deduced to the video that I don't even want to really repeat the images of, and then having someone who's supposed to be a world leader deduce it to, well, um, I didn't have anything to do with it. It had something to do with Lion King. Those perceptions, we have to understand, are received by many. And some of those many are people who still perceive us stereotypically. So, in a way, whilst we're doing what was said to learn and to teach and to mentor and to create, within that we can branch into music, into spoken word, into all aspects of media, defining ourselves, debunking stereotypes that are still alive and well. We have to do that, and we can do that.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to note a comment by Juanita Ford in the chat that says also, when we share our stories, keeping history intertwined in it is also important. She says, so you don't lose those who paved the way. And I agree with you, Anita, on that. And, I just want to switch gears a little bit to the social media because you mentioned both Lorena and Dr. Oliwani Femi, you mentioned about social media. So when you look at social media and you look at the fact that it has given Black women a platform and a way to take control over their own narratives, how is that shifting the broader media landscape, you think? And what limitations or hurdles come with it? So, Lavina, you want to start first, and then anybody else who wants to jump in, feel free to do so.
Yeah, of course. I think social media is giving us a platform to tell our stories in the way that we want them to be told. They're not being told by other people or through like a Eurocentric lens or anything like that. We have full control over that, which I think is great. And it's connected me to a lot of people as well. But unfortunately, with a platform like social media, like sometimes there are issues with algorithms. So not like Black content creators not being, their content not being showed. Or for me as a publicist, like I've worked with influencers, and then what I'll notice is that sometimes I will pitch them for certain things and they won't get it, or they'll get it, but they won't be getting paid the same as someone else that we know who is white that are doing the same thing. So there's different setbacks there. But I think also just going back to also learning media, learning the business side of it as well, to just be educated on that, to know what we have to do and be strategic about it as well. Because I think social media is a great tool if it's used correctly.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Dr. Oliwani Femi?
Thank you very much. As she said, with social media comes different things happening to us today because it has created new pathways and for us to reclaim storytelling. But it also comes with new challenges, like she mentioned, algorithmic bias and performative authenticity. Everybody wants to show up in certain ways to just make it look real, even when it's not real. Like we tend to show things that isn't. And pressure to constantly prove legitimacy is out there. So the question isn't just about what social media is doing to us today, but what are we doing out there? How are we pushing our stories out there to reclaim the power of narrative that we need to reclaim? So I would shift this a bit to say we also need to learn to reclaim the narrative out there. And how do we do that? Let's just try to ensure that we push our stories out there with intentionality and ensure it feels aligned with what we stand for, what the Black stories should feel like, should look like, and in all honesty, because not just that's performing well, we also need to lead with purpose instead of pressure of, okay, you have to show up this way on social media. This is how it has to be seen on social media. There's that life of this is what social media demands from us. So we need to live with authenticity, like tell the story raw. People would accept it for who you are. And all of the narratives we've been trying to reclaim comes out naturally when we do that, when we take that power in our hands. So I think in a different manner when it comes to social media, tell your stories as it should. And whoever embraces it, embraces it. Forget about algorithmic bias. Those that will embrace it will embrace that story.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other panelists want to share their views on social media and
I'll
the
step
role?
in
Yeah.
because of the algorithm part. One of the things is I always say when I'm, mentoring any young people, any students, that social media can build you, but it can also break you. So be careful. And also, Lorena talked about the algorithms because one of the advice I would give is don't let the metrics convince you that silence means failure or that virality equals truth. So it's all about the patience and the difference. And again, it's all about how you intentionally use social media for success.
Thank you for that. And I want to switch gears and delve a little deeper into representation. So first, I'm going to start with a quote by Kamala Harris. And she says, there's a lot of work to be done to make sure our leaders reflect the people they are supposed to represent. The more diverse a group of decision makers, the more informed the decision will be. Until we achieve full representation, we all should understand we are falling short of the ideals of the country. And I, for one, as someone who has dabbled in and arguably still is in the political arena as a school board trustee, I think that representation is not only important for our young ones coming up, but I think it's important to be in every facet of at all the different tables because we need the anchors to represent us, but we also need the editors, right? The CEOs, the people making decisions on what stories come, the people running the algorithms. So, and if you look, for example, according to Stats Canada, right, Black Canadians are much more likely to report experiencing discrimination than non-racialized people, for example. The Statistics Canada analysis found that about 41%, that's almost 1 in 2, 41% of Black individuals reported discrimination based on race or skin color. And I would even argue that it's more because a lot of these incidents go unreported, which was roughly 15 times higher than among non-racialized, non-Indigenous populations. Data also shows that Black people born in Canada report higher rates of discrimination, about 65%, than Black immigrants, about 36%, highlighting the layered experience within the country. So, in terms of what's advice or what are your thoughts on the importance of representation?
I can go. I love this question about representation. Again, I'm going back to, it's not about being seen, it's about who gets to shape. Stories don't just reflect our culture, they produce it. And so when we think about, the challenges right now, the truth is, again, going back to visibility without power is not liberation. So if you're not, and Lisa talked about it, I think Lorena and all of the speakers talked about it. If you're not on the screen, but in the room, if your story is funded but not owned, if your culture is celebrated but not respected, representation becomes performance and not progress.
Can I follow up with that?
Absolutely.
Thank you. To your point, and hence why we have to be in these rooms at the helm of decision, because decisions have always been tied to stereotypes, and the decisions to portray us in a light that is not the stereotypical monolithic look that intertwines, as Juanita had said, our histories, the way we have experienced it. There will always be that 41% or more. I would challenge that that might be even more now, because we've now seen here in Canada, we like to say perhaps the states, America, but here in Canada, departments of diversity in education and every aspect of living being reduced, because now what do we need that for? So it is important for us to also be the creators of that narrative. And then when we can't be in that door, we're no longer at that table, we're moved from that table, that we study, we look at the algorithms, we look at the demographics, and we look at how we can create our own spaces, how we can use that space too to recreate the stereotypes that still exist, right? And I think part of that is, I don't know all of the how, I'll be honest, but we have to own it. We have to be the owners and the authors and the creators. I hope that makes sense.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And, it's interesting because Canada often prides itself on being inclusive. So, Sharon, I'm going to start with you and ask you, how does that national story help or hinder authentic representation?
So, authentic representation. So, it is my hope, and I'm thinking for the future, the Canadian media landscape as we know it today, that we no longer have to justify our lived experience, our lived stories, our lived narratives, and our, authentic representation becomes and is seen as a strength rather than as a risk. It's us authentically to decide, how we tell our stories, how we share our stories. It's still a challenge. Being authentic, it's still that challenge, especially in today's landscape, society, and space. So, and there's a lot of hindrance in terms of what we do and how we do it. But I go back to, again, the path forward. The path forward is knowing how to strategize, knowing how to choose your battles, and hopefully this, authentic media influence, it's a multifaceted approach, So it's, again, understanding, and I hope that the decision makers, they're more come from diverse backgrounds so that we can get more genuine storytelling, that we can get more funding. I'm aware that there's still challenges with funding, but through social media, if we're able to engage our audiences and be able to highlight various cultural perspectives, this can change the narrative to authenticity as it is.
Mhm. Thank you for that. Because, these lived experiences of discrimination are often reinforced or dismissed by mainstream narratives. And it points to why representation in media and other cultural storytelling is not just symbolic, but connected to tangible inequalities faced by Black communities in Canada. And while these particular stats don't directly measure media representation, they illustrate, and the statistic that I'd mentioned before, right? The broader social context in which narratives about Black women and Black communities unfold. And I can tell you, as a public school board trustee, when I tell people about the stories I encounter in families that I serve and the discrimination, for example, that they face, the way that they are marginalized by the system, people often gasp, and there's a sense of, oh, but we're Canada and we are better than the South. And I think, it comes back to these authentic stories. It is about debunking the myth that, oh, we don't have racism in Canada, right? And we're a multicultural kumbaya society. And I think it is very, very important to start having these courageous conversations, because I have seen many times when people would, we have had individuals that was literally had her life threatened because she dared to comment that Canada is just as racist as the US. And in fact, she argued that it was worse, right? And it was like, oh, how could you say that? Right? And it sort of boils down to, do you think it's better to have it sort of very covert, undercover, and everybody's smiling away with you while stabbing you at the back or speaking negatively about you under their breath? Or is it better for somebody to just come to your face and say, hey, I don't like you because XYZ, right? And I guess it comes down to personal choice. Some people figure, oh, the covert, polite racism is better than the in your face overt racism, right? And, as Donna says in the chat, she's disappointed but not shocked that Black journalists' stories are being suppressed and perhaps banished, right? So you mentioned, Lorena, that sometimes, you pitch a story and people don't necessarily want to feature, or they change the algorithm. And I can tell you in my day-to-day work too, it is like they try to, push under the rug, that proverbial rug, some of the real lived experiences, for example, of kids in education. It's not a media story because it's like, we don't want to talk about it, right? And nobody's going to, oh, it doesn't exist. People are going to believe you, right? And they don't make sure that these stories are told. And I think it's very important that, we hopefully, by doing this episode, we can elevate these voices and, draw attention to the fact that there is a lot of authentic representation that needs to occur. Now, before I go on, I just wanted to read a comment by that's in the chat. And Juanita again posted and said, love, community care, and guidance are power. They shaped values, raise future leaders, build resilience, and create alternative systems of support outside dominant institutions. When that kind of power exists without oversight from the dominant culture, it does become threatening because we can't be easily managed, surveilled, or rewritten. And I think that's very important, right? The control, they're losing control. Where our history, our upbringing. This is why you often see Black leadership heavily monitored or undermined. Like, ladies, how many times you're talking to your colleague and everybody's like, oh, what are they talking about? Right? Two Black people are talking, right? Black women promoted as support, but not authority. Cultural expressions are framed as unprofessional, too emotional, or radical. As Black people, we love. It's our culture. It's not that love is weak. That it's that love that doesn't require permission and is dangerous to systems built on hierarchy. Wow, that is a lot to unpack there, Juanita. And, as you lady navigate your roles, and I guess I'll start with you, Lorena, in terms of how do you see, just reflecting on Winita's comments, in terms of Black leadership and the fact that it is heavily monitored, and how do you navigate that?
It's a tough question.
Yeah.
So basically, leadership heavily monitored or undermined. I could speak from my experiences, not really a leadership role, but just being a part of a team and just trying to have your voice heard is sometimes difficult. I know for me, if ever I have an opportunity, I try to always bring somebody up with me or suggest people that I know are an expert in certain areas that are Black or a person of color to give them that opportunity. And a lot of times, my suggestions or my voice was being ignored in those rooms. And I think also for somebody that is in leadership, I think there's a lot of pressure put on them as well, because I know for probably some of them, they are trying to make change, but they're being monitored, they're being undermined, they're not being taken seriously. So I know that could be a bit tough.
Mm-hmm. And Dr. Oliwani Femi, how in your role, how do you navigate like obstacles and the pushback? Any advice?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I would share this from a personal experience as a brand development strategist. I would say, for example, when I set up a platform during the COVID times while I was trying to support a lot of local business owners, I realized that a lot of people saw that from a place of just community support. And then it became the same thing over the years, like year one, year two, year three, into the fourth year. And then I realized I also needed to reposition some things because the perception was just community support. There was a lot of limitation to what exactly I stood for and what the expertise should be seen out there. So I also just felt, because being Black, they thought, okay, why should we regard her as the one leading this platform to support a lot of small businesses in the community? And then when all of that shifted, because even the work itself was strategic, technical, and business driven, but they never saw all of that, just community support. Once I became more intentional about how my story and expertise were positioned, I think that helped me a lot, and the perception shifted really, really well. And so the opportunities, I started getting invitation to rooms, and I could speak, I could have my own views, I could stand for myself and, of course, for other Black women, what needs to be said. And I think that also helped them understand that, see, Black women can also lead, Black women can do this, Black women can, because I saw more literature from being an African. They just felt, okay, this space is more for a particular set of Black people, because I don't know if she understands what I'm saying, Lorena. I think in Montreal, we have that kind of special kind of treatment. There's an Anglo-Black issue and there's let me say Franco-Black. I don't want to say much, but that division, I saw it firsthand. Being an Anglo-Black woman, I'm a Nigerian. We speak just English coming from where I immigrated from. So that affected me a lot. But with time, I stood my ground and, of course, repositioned myself. So for me, I think repositioning could help you. And just always stand for what you know, because if you don't stand for something, you fall for anything. Let them say what they want to say. Let them see you in a particular light, but keep doing what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Lisa, in the music industry, do you have any perspective going from music side?
Yeah, I do. And I think it extenuates because music is such a force that it is part of everything we do. It is our feelings, it is our histories, it ties itself lyrically in different ways and different branches. And I think the important thing is that the narrative will be controlled, or there will be an attempt to control. And there's a reason why. It's our brilliance. It's our contribution to the world through what we have seen, so what we have experienced, and we bring that through lyrically or in media, not necessarily just music radio, but radio can be a force of talk radio, and talking about situations and things that we are going through. So I think the best thing that we can also do is to know who we stand within, like what circle we stand within, and health and wellness, because this beats you up, for lack of a better term. I hope that's not offensive, but we also have to be well, and that can lend itself to our faith. It can lend itself to the personal histories that we are attached to of strength. And so, for every control that tries to control us, we can resist that. We can control our resistance to elevate ourselves. So, I think that would be what I would have to say.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. And it's often said that negativity sells, right? Nobody wants to listen to good news stories. And I also think that it is, as you mentioned, Lisa, you have to think of your mental wellness, right? So you'd have recently I remember when this big uproar in Hollywood came out about a certain celebrity that was caught doing all kinds of crazy things that involved baby oil, right? And people started coming out of the woodwork, and they were saying, oh, how they compromise their values to do X, Y, Z if you want to make it. Because a lot of times in media industry, if people are punished, in quotations, they are limited in upward mobility if they don't toe the line, right? And you don't, if you dare to push back and challenge the status quo, and you have people who are willing to say, I want to be my true authentic self, and I'm not willing to sell out, right? So I think it comes down to choices that people make also, right? And I think that especially for the young people that are going to see this, I want to encourage young people to, often when we talk, it sounds like doom and gloom, and it sounds hopeless. But I want to now switch gears and ask each of you to give like positive kind of encouragement to young people wanting to start in media, young Black women that are listening, to say, hey, you do have a role to play in how media shapes the perceptions of Black women in Canada and beyond, because with social media, you go beyond Canada too, right? You can. So could each of you give me like a 2-minute sort of encouraging word for our young Black women that are thinking about going into media, and how they can go about ensuring that media positively shapes the perceptions of Black women. So
That's great, Kathy.
Okay.
I actually would love to start on that. I love that
Okay.
question. So throughout my personal career, and it's still ongoing, some of the advice I would give is, years ago, allyship is very important. Don't discount it. And at the time, the word wasn't allyship. There are people in your networks. It could be family. It could be somebody you meet on a bus. It could be anyone. And I remember when I was thinking about my career and where I wanted to go, whether it was fashion, whatever it was at the time. And she told me, use your left brain, because a lot of young people want to be in front of the camera. They want to do all this stuff in front. But there's a lot of roles behind the scenes, which you can also make a difference. And I've done that within my own career. So use your left brain to work in your right brain industry. I can attribute my success through networking, mentorship, and sponsorship. So my advice is, getting the good education. It's important to set that foundation, but having a degree means you have the aptitude to learn. However, networking and getting a mentor and a sponsor will then also give you those skill sets that you wouldn't normally get within the space of learning in the university. Always focus on reinventing your skill sets every year. And remember that the key to success doesn't happen right away. And going back to talking about decisions and choices, especially in social media, because, employers usually go on social media now, LinkedIn, all over, to see what it is that you're posting, who you are, who are you following, what are the comments. So be wise about that. Be wise about, what you post, which space you're in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, can I go on from there?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So in addition to what Queen Sharon said, I would say for us to be mindful of what we do, like how you show up intentionally out there and to position yourself in the way that you want to be seen or heard. Let your expertise be seen how you want it to be seen, because that really matters. And to lead with purpose, lead from the heart, not getting pressure unnecessarily, like just lead with purpose, with intentionality. Know what you're doing, like build yourself, like you said, like get skill set and all of that. So you need to do all of that so that it makes you ready, not just getting yourself fully into the scene. Get yourself prepared for whatever it is you want to do. Be prepared. Like the Boy Scout says, like be prepared. Just get yourself ready and lead with purpose. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Lisa?
Those are all good points. And I would think what I'd add is to find your discipline, like understand your niche and then be disciplined and seek that that person perhaps, and that might not even be us, but someone that you can emulate and then mold it to who you want to be and get that education. Keep up with what is happening with social media, with AI, with things that are new or perceived to be new. And within that, self-care is going to be important as well. And know that within all of that that we have suggested you do, that it's worth it because we have stories to tell and stories that are created from our history. So that would be important, the discipline and the belief that you can do it. You can.
Thank you for that. And Lorena?
Well, what I always tell younger people is to try it out. A lot of times, like we said before, you don't know all of the different roles that you can have behind the camera. For one, I didn't know when I was younger. So that is something that's really important that I tell people. For me, I never saw myself in front of the camera as a podcast host. I'm more of a behind the scenes kind of girl doing PR or producing the radio show. So that is something that I would tell people to do, and also to reach out to different people that you see in the field that you want to be in, because there's a lot of people that could give the advice or the lessons that they learned along the way, the mistakes that they made, so that we're not repeating the same thing over again. That's another thing too, to just reach out to people. People are eager to give that information out, so not to be scared to do that. That's something I still do till this day, and always be open to learn. So even if you do go, you get your education, or you do enter a program, like I know in Toronto they have the Remix project where they give different like knowledge information on media roles, but always be open to learn, because for something like social media or podcasting is always evolving. So it's always good to stay up to date on what is happening, because sometimes I feel like we don't always get the information and we're kind of always playing catch up. So always be open to learn. But honestly, if it is something that you want to do, you can definitely get it done.
Wow, wow, wow. Lots of amazing nuggets there. And I just want to recap because I'm really passionate about our youth and making sure that they can benefit from these wise and wonderful words that you're imparting today. So, to the young people listening, and you want to make a difference in how Black women are perceived in the media, remember allyship. We heard about networking. A lot of, think outside the box. So not everything happens in front of the camera. There are a lot of opportunities behind the scenes and a lot of opportunities for you to make and have impact. You lead from your heart. Be intentional. Be wise about your social media. Be mindful about what you do. Find your niche. Find your discipline and be disciplined. I like that. Be open to learning. And I think keeping up with AI, and I just want to segue into AI a bit. In what role do you see AI playing in how perceptions of Black women are portrayed in the media? Anybody want to talk about AI? Because
That's a great question, because AI can create images, but who's creating that image and what that image should look like? There is a soca, an AI soca artist, a female soca artist that that has a video out now, and I had to look twice, and I'm like, wait a minute, what did I just watch? Again, who created that? Created it for an image that sells, soca and fun times and things like that. But being in the music business, how does that extend itself now to um, writers of music, artists, and when it comes to accolades like the music awards that we just watched? Um, are AI artists going to be in categories with artists that are real people, and then what stories are they going to tell again to what is the trend? So that's a very tricky um, question that we perhaps would watch depending on where you are in media. And I'm speaking again to music because this can be a replacement era, really, of those who produce music and artists and things like that. So I think it's going to be one that we should watch um, and see what happens and be ready for what we want to happen within the realm of that kind of competition.
I'd like to follow Lisa on that. You've made some great points. I feel that AI right now is playing a quiet but powerful role in shaping how Black women are seen and heard and valued. And it doesn't invent bias. What it's doing, it's learning, it's amplifying, it's pulling from what's already there. And it's mirroring historical stereotypes. So we really need to, it's being trained, or systems are trained by existing media and language and imagery. And so we don't want to come across, as that angry Black woman or, those types of patterns. So really and truly, this algorithm, it's about how do we recommend algorithms on social platforms where Black women creators are boosted, where our tones and our voice are seen as professional or relatable. It's a work in progress.
Yeah, it's definitely a work in progress, and quite interesting territories and waters we're entering into. And it's amazing how quickly the time has gone. And I'd like to actually look and answer some questions from the chat. I'm going to pull from some of these questions. So any one of you panelists can answer them. So I'm going to start with a question where someone says, as a seventh generation queer, Black, non-binary person, it is imperative that we are not reduced to a monolith of identity. How do you protect the uniqueness of our Black ancestors on this land while creating space for other Black ethnicities or nationalities, and are not erasing the uniqueness of people's identities like queerness and gender fluidity by the majority of others. So does anybody want to answer that one?
I can start that off. I think that's an important point, again, because it goes to um what we haven't said, like how we categorize stereotypes. Some stereotypes are just a given, and some stereotypes are this is what we will accept. This is what we will have heard. And to that point, with differing identities that are not the stereotypical um identities that we have and that we are experiencing and should be embracing, it's a hard question and it's a hard one. And I think it goes again to um we should be exploring the ways that we can be the narrative, or we can be at the helm of the table of exposure and creation, creating our own media platforms, our podcasts, if you will, our exposure, and giving the world who we are, how we want to be seen. And so that goes to us creating that. But a piece that we probably haven't talked about that is tied to all of this, including this question, is we've got to then seek funding. Uh, a lot of some of the things that, or most of the things that we do are tied to resources. And so we've got to also seek those avenues too. We want to create, we want to be able to create, but we have to have space. We have to have studio space. We have to have those kind of entities as well that attach themselves to the creation that we want to do, that we want to self-produce. And so that's what I would offer.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, Paula asks, how do we get the message across that we must try to be multicultural, that is, respecting the narratives we meet and hear with openness to learn about each other as we grow to embrace our amazing diversity to build inclusive communities? So, how you suggest we get that message across? And actually make people think that is important and relevant. Anyone wants to?
I don't want to monopolize, but
No, go ahead, Lisa.
I've been thinking about that, watching my daughter's friendship circle and living in a very Caribbean household, which is also very we 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 see ourselves as Afrocentric minded. Some people call it Pan-African. We have those connections. And I find what I've seen in my personal experience with my daughter is that her friendship circle is diverse, but it's made of those who are similar, very proud of their heritage, their culture. They wear it in their clothing, in their speak, and they share that. And I think that she seeks those circles, even in the even though she's part of the Black Students Association at her school, she also is in inter or multicultural associations, and they have that. She's also an athlete, and they gear themselves towards that. They don't. What I find of her friendship groups, and I'll tie it back to all this, is that they seek the same things. They want to be seen. They want to be heard. They want to create, and so I think that. With this, and even with music, and to me, the attack on diverse spaces that had ought to be in radio and music and in broadcasting are disappearing. It's going to be our our Rashidas and Lilies and Simrans who are going to create that space, not erasing who they are culturally and traditionally, but seeing those commonalities within their other friends and creating spaces. They do podcasts, they do all of these things that we're talking about. They inject who they are in that. And I think that we can just support them. And we have to look at places like I think some of us here are professors or create these kind of initiatives and programs. That's what we have to do. We have to make sure that whilst others have taken that away and shut that down, we're creating it. We're picking up that piece and creating that space in our communities, within our organizations, and hopefully we can try and push that into our work as well. And be insistent when we're on the boards of our of music and the boards of our newscasts and all of those spaces where media is tied to that. And it says shape those perceptions. We have to shape those perceptions, but we can't if we're not there. So we have to make it if we're not there as well. We've got to recreate those spaces and bring those in, because you'll see um, like-minded people, regardless of who they are, what they look like, what religion, they gravitate because they have that commonality, and that's what can keep us alive and talk to that multi traditional, cultural, diverse reality that this world is in, and let people know it's important.
Yeah, absolutely, Lisa, because I can tell you when I was reading Paula's question, I thought immediately of Jamaica, right? This amazing island where our motto is out of many, one people. And I have seen a diverse group of people all come together. They hold on to the different cultures. I always say we have literally every ethnicity living in Jamaica, right? Every religion, right? And it is a matter of, surrounding yourself, as you said, with like-minded individuals that believe in the humanity of people. And it is basically that simple. And people that are bold enough to have courageous conversations, right? And a deep commitment to eradicating discrimination against all people. Because it can't be okay that we're going to say that it's okay. We don't want them to discriminate against us, but it's okay to discriminate against this group. Because that's not how discrimination works, right? It's, to me, I think discrimination is really about hate, fear, right? And that is why the people that would try to have negative depictions about Black women are, I would say, they're ignorant people, they're fearful people, and they're hateful people, right? And I think another important ingredient, I would say, would be love and just eradicating that hatefulness in people. And I think that, yes, AI, social media, there's a lot of scary parts about it, but there are a lot of good parts about it because it gives an avenue for people who ordinarily would not get to get a different perspective or get exposed to a different perspective. They can be reached. And I think back to George Floyd, the summer of George Floyd, where a lot of people were actually forced, because we're in the middle of a pandemic, to listen and watch and learn, right? And it'll be interesting to see how the craziness that's happening, especially down south, that's infiltrating the world, and people are now getting all different perspectives, right? How that impacts, how Black women in particular are seen. I think there's a lot of discussion, for example, with that horrific depiction of an amazing, powerful, beautiful woman, Michelle Obama. Those stories are entering spaces that traditionally they probably wouldn't have. So I'm really excited about the positive outlook that Black women, especially as more and more Black women become content creators, the difference they can make. And you, my panelists, inspired me. It was absolutely amazing listening to each and every one of you. So Dr. Oliwani Femi, Lorena, Sharon, and Lisa, this has been such an amazing little over an hour. And, I learned so much from you, amazing, beautiful woman. And thank you for sharing your Sunday afternoon with 100 ABC and making season 5, episode for the best yet of webinars on the 100 Accomplished Black Women webinar. It has truly been an honor and a pleasure. And thank you. And enjoy the rest of the day. And keep warm.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Look how far you have come on your own, but never alone. Through the rain and through the shine, here's your moment. It's your time.